Well, I did it. I went into the Mundy's house. I figured the exterior was a good indication as to what was to be expected inside, but what I discovered was so much worse than I could have imagined. I told y'all how they came down the mountain late at night. Well, they did it again. 1 a.m. seems to be their preferred time to do whatever it is they're doing, so I sat in the dark peeking out the blinds and watched the 5 younger Mundys walk past the house, and then trailing about 20 feet behind them was the old lady. She didn't stop and scream this time. She just hobbled past without even looking in my direction. I waited for them to get a ways down the road, and then I grabbed my pistol, put on my headlamp, and headed towards the house. Nighttime on the mountain is dark. There ain't any light pollution out here, so there's an added creepiness to the Mundy house at night. People not from around here might look at the dark, decaying old house and assume it was long abandoned, but the reality is that it's been occupied longer than any house on the mountain. Once on the property, I turned on my headlamp so that I could cross the yard without tripping over any junk. As I said before, there's heaps of stuff thrown around here that doesn't make any sense. Car parts, but no car. Kids' toys, but no kids. Maybe they're stealing this stuff during their late-night excursions. I made it to the front door, which was easy enough to get through considering it hadn't been locked. Apparently they ain't worried about intruders. As I stepped inside, the first thing I noticed was the smell. It's by far the worst odor I've ever had the displeasure of inhaling. The second thing I noticed was the buzzing of flies. Lots of them. At that moment, I was confident I'd be finding a dead body. I plugged my nose and took another step forward. I was in that hall I'd seen the old lady standing in so many years ago. At one point it was wallpapered, much of which has been peeled away over time. What remains is stained and dirty. The walls have holes in them. You can see into other rooms through these holes. And I could also tell that the wood was as old as the house itself. There'd obviously been no history of remodeling. With each step, I thought I was going to break through the floor, but by some miracle, I stayed strong. I entered a room to the left. By my understanding of typical house layouts, I'd say the room was at one point either a den or a dining room, but now it appeared to be a place that they slept and urinated. That's right, they do it in the same room, both directly on the floor. Although maybe the filthy pillows are used for something other than sleeping. I guess that's just wishful thinking on my part. The buzzing of the flies grew louder as I headed towards the back of the house. I entered the kitchen, and it became a roar. The room was host to more flies than I'd ever seen. The source of the smell was in there as well, and my stomach couldn't handle it. I tried my best to get outside, but I couldn't make it in time. I vomited in the hallway. Panic set in. They were going to see the vomit and know someone was there. And after the incident the other night, and then the blood on the window, I figured I'd be suspect number 1. They don't have much for towels, maybe none at all, so I grabbed one of those dirty pillows. I wiped up my mess, which at the time I did consider maybe they wouldn't even notice it. The house was that bad. They don't use pillowcases, so I just returned the pillow to the room and flipped it over so that the puke-soaked side was hidden. Honestly though, the vomit ain't detracted much from the current condition of that pillow. I took a breath, plugged my nose, and headed back into the kitchen. I stepped into the swarm of flies. Keeping my eyes open was difficult. Not sure you've ever come across an odor so bad your eyes burn, but that's what this was. Plus all the flies buzzing around my face. I realized that what the flies were circulating were several plastic buckets sitting on the floor. This was a Civil War era kitchen, by the way. No fridge, just a wood-burning stove, moldy old cabinets, and buckets. Reluctantly, I stepped towards the buckets. I held my breath and looked inside, and once again, my stomach lurched. Inside were pounds of rotten meat. I couldn't tell from what, and I didn't have it in me to keep looking. I stormed out of the room and somehow managed to fight back the bile. I guess I know what they eat now. The house is 2 stories, and the stairs are in horrible condition. The railing is gone and just about every other step is damaged. But I needed to know what was upstairs. However, as I walked back up the hall, I noticed something. There was a door below the stairs, and it was padlocked. Is it weird that I thought even a padlock would be too complicated for the Mundys? I didn't have anything on me to break the lock, and I sure as shit wasn't going to shoot it. So I continued on up the stairs. 3 bedrooms. The first one I went into was small and full of children's clothes, modern clothing. This was, of course, very alarming, as that's all that was in there. Just a massive pile of it. Do they have kids? Are they stealing kids' clothes? But worst of all, are they stealing kids? Children do go missing out here occasionally. The second room was a similar size, maybe a bit larger. This room was badly damaged. There was a large hole in the floor, which allowed me to see back downstairs. The walls had a sort of primitive artwork on it, like someone finger painted on them. They didn't use paint, though. The color palette seemed to be limited to colors that come out of the human body. Handprints, stick figures, shapes. But one thing left me deeply unsettled. There was a series of 4 numbers that I recognized. My address. I moved on to the final room. The door was closed. I turned the knob and went in. This was the largest bedroom, the master. Inside was one of the more shocking discoveries from the night. Aside from some dust, it was clean, and not only that, it was decorated like an actual bedroom. There was a full-size bed, a stand-up mirror, a chest of drawers, nightstands. However, the furniture was very old, Civil War era. Sitting on the nightstand was a framed picture, black and white. A man and a woman. It looked to be from the 1800s. They weren't smiling, as is often the case in pictures from that time. They weren't deformed like the Mundys are now, but they did look like siblings. Similar face and hair color. I recognized the dress on the woman as the one I'd seen the old lady wearing. It must have been Levi and Sarah. The nightstand that the picture had been sitting on was positioned beneath an uncovered window, so I had turned off my headlamp as to not draw attention. The light from the moon was sufficient enough. I turned my headlamp back on to snap a picture of the photograph, and when I did, I heard that familiar soul-piercing scream come from the back of the house. I immediately shut off my light and looked out the window, and there they were, hurtling themselves up the steep incline of the mountain like animals. The old lady was clinging to the back of one of the men, and she was staring right at me. I dropped the picture and ran. I lunged down the stairs as quickly as possible and out the house. I didn't turn back. I sprinted home, ran inside, and locked the door. The gun hasn't left my side. I was happy to see the sunlight this morning, and that the Mundys didn't come down the mountain after me. But I didn't get a lick of sleep. I can't call the police. There's nothing to report aside from my own trespassing. My address is written on their wall in blood. Just the numbers, but that's enough to freak me out. And what's up with the children's clothes? My gut tells me I should take my parents and leave town for a bit, but I think I'm close to finding out something big. I need to know what's in that padlocked room. And where do the Mundys go at night?